fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers as we talk Seahawks football. Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, talking game 3 of the preseason, the last and final game. A lot to be decided here. A lot of players on the bubble hoping to make the roster, or at least having a shot at it. Starting quarterback position is almost solidified, sounds like, but there is an outside shot that Drew Lock could do enough in this game to tip the scales. Lots to talk about, Keith. Welcome in, man.
Yeah, just that thing that you started with right there at the end was the quarterback competition. There was a lot of fans out there that are upset that Lock's not getting the start in this game, that Geno is again, despite the fact that he's looked just not good in the first 2 preseason games. Like, why is he still getting the start when there's another option? And so, what's your take on that?
Well, it's interesting because there's something to be said about good practice players, good team players, good teammates in the locker room, the kind of the veteran presence, even though he hasn't been a starter per se. There's a lot to like about Geno Smith from a coach's perspective. So if you put yourself into Pete Carroll's shoes and to, the offensive coordinator, all that kind of stuff, and his teammates and the way they look at and view this situation, there's a lot of positives there, even though the play hasn't translated per se on the field and scoring drives and so forth in the 2 preseason games that we've had so far. Maybe it does translate a little bit more in the locker room, on the practice field and so forth. And, his turnover ratio and so forth is kind of right up Pete's alley. And so you take a look at all those factors. I get it. And the unfortunate timing of Drew Lock's COVID situation didn't help at all. And so all of those things do kind of tend to point in that direction. I guess I would probably end up there-ish if I was making decisions as well. But Drew Lock's the better player. Drew Lock's the better player with the higher upside. He might have a few more mistakes, but he's also going to have those positive opportunities, those explosive plays that Pete Carroll really likes. Now, if we can rein in those turnovers and have him play within the system a little bit more, maybe there's something there. And it'd be worth it in this season where we know we're unlikely to go to the playoffs. Let's just be honest. We're probably between 4 and 7 win team, depending on the bounce of the ball and turnovers. And let's let Drew Lock have that opportunity. The younger quarterback, good prospect, gives the team an opportunity to see him, to find out if they want to re-sign him after the season or if they want to move forward in a completely different direction. We've always known this is going to be the situation. We've spent the entire offseason talking about it. Here we are in the final game, and here is Geno Smith starting. I understand Drew Lock's going to take maybe 3/4 of this game. And I have mixed emotions about that, because now you're going to put Drew Lock out there with the second and third stringers. He's going to have, second and third string guys on the line protecting for him and so forth. So you don't want to get a guy like that injured in a game like this as well. So, but if all things are considered, it sounds like he's going to get an opportunity to blow Pete's socks off. And if he does, maybe he's got a good shot at that starting spot week 1. If he doesn't, it sounds like Geno's kind of solidified himself in there. And if he doesn't do anything wrong in this game, maybe he doesn't do anything great, I think he's probably the guy. Sorry for all that long-winded stuff, but
no, it makes sense. The whole thing also makes me wonder if, as a team, they know something that's going to happen as far as player acquisition. Like when the 49ers gave Garoppolo's agent permission to talk with other teams to help seek a trade. Well, that also means that he can talk to other teams about contracts, because anyone that trades for Garoppolo is going to sign him to a deal. Well, the Seahawks go, okay, we'll sign him to a deal, but we're going to wait for him to get cut because we know it's probably going to happen. if they've got a deal and a framework in place waiting for the Garoppolo thing to happen,
it could
then
be
for them,
very quick. Could be very quick. It could be coming on Tuesday or Wednesday at the latest.
yeah. And so it could be something where they don't really care about getting Locke in there and ready to start and all of that, because you're going to bring in Garoppolo. He's going to start taking the snaps with the ones. You throw Geno out there week 1 if Garoppolo's not ready, but you get Garoppolo out there starting week 2, and something like that. If that's the case, and these things are kind of happen behind the scenes, this whole quarterback competition was never a competition. You know what I mean? Like, it was always just about waiting until they could move on.
It's hard because there's 31 other teams in the NFL. I understand that, Jimmy doesn't have a starting opportunity in 31 other systems, but he is a solid quarterback. He'd be an excellent backup for any quarterback in this league, I think. So there are other teams. So if you're locking that in, and that's a little risky, but I agree with you. The quarterback play has been subpar here. I know that people want to support their team, support their quarterback, whoever that is. I get that. I will do that as well. But just from being realistic, all options have to be on the table for John Snyder here. And Jimmy Garoppolo is one of those options. If he is released, and there's 99.9% chance that he will be, San Francisco is currently holding on to a $25 million guaranteed salary come Wednesday morning for him. And I think that guarantees, I read somewhere, Keith, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe that it's fully guaranteed throughout the entire, for the whole season. I think it's isn't he cuttable at any time, or is it automatically fully guaranteed?
It's automatically fully guaranteed if he makes the 53-man roster. So if they
that changes
him,
it. So it's not game by game. It's not like he makes
yeah.
Okay.
If they cut him, if they keep him on the roster, they're going to pay him, and no one's trading for that contract, so they're stuck paying him all year. Right. If they cut him,
and then so if he's cut, then any team in the NFL can pay him whatever he will accept.
True, but part of it is, if you were him, you believe you're a starter, you're going to go take an opportunity where you can start,
and that's right here in Seattle.
And there's 2 teams that don't have a starting quarterback right now. There's Houston and Seattle. And
Davis Mills in Houston is their guy. They really like him. He hasn't had a great camp. He hasn't had good performances yet in the preseason, but he did well last year. And so I think they're fine riding him into the season and seeing kind of what they have there.
Yeah, I mean, last year he started out on the bench and then eventually became the guy and played okay. And I think they're not paying him anything, right? And so for them, they're in the beginnings of a rebuild. Not paying a quarterback
I don't think
a ton of money.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say not paying a quarterback in the middle and the beginnings of a rebuild is like, that makes a lot of sense. So
yes,
I don't even think
and they're not ready for Jimmy Garoppolo. Their roster is not ready. Now you look at Seattle, it is. This team would I'm not going to say it would rise to the level of when Russell Wilson was here, not necessarily, but Jimmy Garoppolo gives them a chance legitimately. I think they get to 10 wins. The quarterbacks we have in house, maybe if everything goes right, I think 7 to 8 wins. Less than 500 team, I think.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of the way it is. I think that you'd have to have outstanding play, like rise above historic levels for both these quarterbacks for the Seahawks to have a chance at more wins. Now it's all entirely possible. Everyone else on the roster is playing well. Maybe that elevates the play of the quarterbacks. Usually the quarterbacks are elevating the play of your offense. But the reverse could be true a little bit. And we'll see. But I'm really excited about the other positions to talk about today, other than the quarterback. We'll be watching that. Obviously, that's a big story, but there's a lot of other stuff going on as well.
Yeah, a lot of stuff that maybe not. It's not as headline worthy, but it's much more interesting. So let's kind of get into some of that.
Yeah, I think the biggest story out of this camp, I'll be completely honest, is Tariq Woolen. The ability of Tariq Woolen to come in here is kind of a 5th round guy, needs a lot of work, is very skilled athletically, but football wise, he's not quite ready for prime time. Needs played in a smaller conference, smaller school, very limited experience of just a couple of years, total of like 15 games or something like that at cornerback.
Making a transition from wide receiver to cornerback, late in college, and then now trying to figure it out as a pro. And but he's looked good. I mean,
he's got an opportunity to start.
Yeah. I'm starting to wonder if Artie Burns isn't going to make the roster.
I think Artie Burns makes the roster initially only because Trey Brown is not going to start the year on the roster.
True. Okay.
So I think I've got Artie Burns, Sidney Jones starting, but Tariq Woolen could start, and Kobe Bryant could start in the slot. Justin Coleman, I don't know where that leaves Justin Coleman, but I think Justin Coleman hangs around on the roster as well, unless they feel like, John Reed, Mike Jackson, rises up. They really like Michael Jackson, and he's performed well.
He played all right last year, yeah.
And he's had a good camp. So that's going to be interesting. They may end up electing to keep 6 corners on this roster instead of 5. I've got them at 5, but they could go 6, and they could, Marquise Blair could be on the bubble. That's another player I want to talk about. Tariq Woolen is going to be, he's going to play this year. I mean, he's going to eventually start for this team and be, an excellent corner. It's from all reports out of camp, he's got a real shot at being the starter day one at outside cornerback for this team. And that's, to me, it's just nothing that you would expect. And we've talked about it endlessly. We both advocated for him to be drafted. He was, but we didn't have any expectations for this year. This was kind of a banking a player type of situation for the future. And turns out he's ready to go. That's a huge story.
We were both super excited about him pre-draft. We were super excited Seattle drafted him. But even with our banging the table for a guy, we were expecting him to come in and compete next year. That this year would be about learning. This year would be about he'd play special teams and he would learn his job. For him to be in the conversation to start week 1 being crazy.
Being the best, one of the best defenders on the entire defense in preseason, not only at corner, but just overall, and even better than Kobe Bryant. Now, Kobe Bryant's been steady and he's solid and whatever, but Tariq Woolen has been everything solid and steady as well, but he's got this tremendous athletic upside and length that you just can't teach. And so, those factors together, he's just crazy.
Bryant, I think you undersold Kobe Bryant.
Okay. I'm not trying to undersell him.
He has been really good.
Yeah.
In camp and in the preseason. And he's been all over the place.
We weren't thinking of him as being a slot guy. We were thinking of him as just kind of an outside guy. They've thrown him in the slot. Justin Coleman and Marquise Blair were kind of thought to be in a competition originally at there. You throw in Kobe Bryant in there. Now he's going to see the field probably 65% of the plays if he ends up starting there. So I'm thrilled. Yeah. There's two position groups I'm really thrilled about in this out of this draft class: the cornerback spot and the offensive line, the tackles. It's just crazy. But hold on, before we get to the tackles, let's talk about Marquise Blair, because we raised that issue, and I think it's a real concern. Marquise Blair's not had a great camp. He's still, he's coming off another injury, and I'm not exactly sure where his heart is and if his skills have dropped. His skills are probably still there, but maybe his body's not cooperating. All reports are that he's kind of teetering on the bubble.
Gone into this season as a starter 2 years in a row, and now he might not make the roster because he didn't really play those 2 years he went into the year as a starter because he got really catastrophic season-ending injuries early in both those seasons, and he might not make the roster. The fact that he might not make the roster even after they traded away Ugo Amadi is, man, I it's just weird. I mean, you and I were both pretty excited about that draft class because they got 2 safeties that we both liked. And Marquise Blair looked like the real deal. Yeah, his rookie year, his second year in camp, then he had the injury. His third year in camp, like they were doing what they had to do to get him on the field. And now it looks like he might not even make the roster. It's a weird situation.
I have to think it's got to be some injury stuff and then some mental stuff. Injuries that significant over that period of time. I mean, you just kind of change as a person. Maybe the priorities have changed, et cetera. And then you've got the ascension of Josh Jones and Ryan Neal. So both steady players, Josh Jones in particular, I think really helps the team with diversity as far as solving some problems there. And then Ryan Neal's been a little bit more injury prone, but has big play ability. We've seen him on the field. He's been successful. Marquise Blair, we just can't say that. He just hasn't been out there enough.
Ryan Neal, I mean, he was a cornerback. They converted him to safety. Then they converted him back to cornerback. Then they converted him back to safety. He's been on the practice squad a number of years. And then a couple of years ago, he took over for
Jamal Adams.
No, for Cam Chancellor.
Really?
And yeah,
he was there. He was there back then.
He was there back then.
I don't recall that.
And got some got some snaps way back then. I mean, he's hung around this team forever. And got played for Adams when Adams got hurt his first year, and no one had any expectations for him to be that good. And he was, and but he, like you were talking about diversity, he can play corner on the outside. He can play strong safety. He can play free safety.
And he's a good tackler.
He is a Swiss Army knife defensive back, and you can't have enough guys like that as depth on your roster, because you only have 45 guys available on game day. Actually, I think it's 46 now, but there's only so many guys. So guys that can play multiple positions if someone gets hurt, and put all the energy they can into special teams and that kind of stuff, they're really valuable. And so yeah, I fully expect him to make the team and continue to just be an important cog in this machine.
So the team, I can't remember the name of the player now, moved on, but anyway, we have Joey Blount still on the team, and Scott Nelson and Deontay Williams rounding that out. We'll see if those guys play a lot. Obviously, there's some special teams roles available. And if Marquise Blair is truly on the roster, maybe they go with a younger player with less injury concerns and upside. Let's go over to the other side and let's talk about that offensive line I was talking about. That if there's a player on defense that we're all happy and surprised about, it might be the Tariq Woolen emergence. But on the offensive side, Keith, it's got to be Abe Lucas at right tackle.
I mean, what else can you say about him? We knew he could pass block. He's got great feet, a lot of technique. And that's pretty much all he did at Washington State was pass block, because, it's the offense that they ran. He has looked like a mauler as a run blocker. He has more pancakes in this preseason than I think everybody else on the line combined. He has just dominated people.
He's literally taken the job. So not to be confused with Jake Curhan losing out. This is a guy that's come in and taken the job from Jake Curhan. I believe that Abe Lucas is now going to start opposite of
Charles
Cross on this offense. And we're going to have two rookie offensive linemen. I think only the second time since 1980 or something like that this has happened, where teams have started two offensive tackles out of the draft in the same year.
It's so weird and it's so rare. And both these guys look so good. I know with Cross, there was all the penalties and weirdness in game 2, but he was dominant in game 1. And I think whatever happened in game 2, we'll see, where that goes as far as that. His play was still good, but he just had all the penalties. And so we'll see if he gets that under control. But both of them have very high ceilings. They can both be outstanding. And to get two starters at key positions like that in one draft, it's just crazy. And you mentioned Jake Curran. He has been taking a bunch of snaps at guard, and with with Damian Lewis's his injury. I'm granted it's not as bad as everyone feared, so he'll still be around. It's not season ending as we thought at first, but that'll push. Curran has a chance to be the third guard going into week one.
And there's Phil Haynes too, who Pete Carroll said is a starting guard in the NFL.
Well, Haynes is going to start if Lewis is out, but Curran becomes the third guard and the third tackle.
Yeah, play 4 positions, which is a great. That almost ensures him. Well, he's going to be on the roster, but
he's going to be on the roster anyway. Yeah. But can you imagine a situation where the team after this year decides to move on from Jackson and his contract, and they stick Curran in at right guard next to Lucas? You're open and running lanes on that right side. You're moving bodies if those two guys are playing next to each other. I could see that happening, and that's just going to be fun.
Do you recall Gabe Jackson's contract? Is this his last year?
I don't think it's his last year, because it was they
gave him an extension when he came.
Yeah, when he came over, they signed an extension. I believe it was 3 years. So he's got 2 more. He's got this year and next year.
But he's cuttable. He's cuttable, I believe.
He's cuttable after this year. And his play last year was great. He was the team's best offensive lineman. But it comes down to he's still a guard, and if there's younger, cheaper players that can do the job.
I'm so excited, dude. I mean, you're the offensive guy. You're offensive line guy, right? But I'm genuinely excited about our offensive line. Now, I would love to have an upgrade at center, but let's see how Austin Blythe does this year. Maybe a really smart, athletic center, smaller in stature, but knows the system, knows and can call the line. Maybe a guy like Austin Blythe is the perfect fit in between all these guys. So I want to see that play out a little bit. But I'm so excited for the future of this offensive line. I mean, this is a type of a thing that you could keep around for 5-6 years, and it would be a really nice and steady play out of this group would just be primo.
So, I mean, as the Seahawks get ready to play Dallas tonight, it's worth noting that Dallas has kind of had the best offensive line in football thing for the last 7 or 8 years, which it isn't true anymore. Their offensive line is going to be in shambles at this point, because
especially Tyron Smith just busted a hammy off of his bone and needs surgery. It's going to be out like 12 weeks, 12 to the season.
Yeah, and the rest of the line, all the pieces. La'el Collins is gone, and you know what I mean. Like, so it just isn't the same as it was even before that injury. And so you've got, but they were still the kind of the cream of the crop. They invested a lot and had that line, and it mattered. It made Dak look really good. I mean, Dak is good, but it made him look even better. It opened up holes for the running game, and offensively they were really, really good, in part because they had this dominant line. And suddenly the Seahawks, with Damian Lewis, who they drafted a couple of years ago, and then they brought in Gabe Jackson last year, and now they've got the 2 offensive tackle spots filled. They're starting to have that same kind of look of Dallas's offensive line a few years ago, where you've just got high end players at 4 out of 5 positions.
Slow down, Keith. Slow down. They got 2 rookies now.
You're right.
And they're going to snap in the NFL yet.
And they're going to play like rookies at time. And we saw that in the second preseason games with Cross. But we also saw in the first preseason game with Cross that he freaking dominated that game. And so did Lucas. They were both dominant players.
Let's see what happens when they get first string all pro level guys coming at them around the edges. There's going to be a little bit of growing pains. I'll just say that I agree with you, though, that the premier top end offensive line future is ours to be had.
Yeah.
But it's going to take 10 games.
Oh, I'm not saying it's going to be that way week 1. I'm saying I'm looking at the future and looking at the next 4 years with Lewis and the 2 tackles, and then whatever they choose to do at the other 2 positions as they continue to grow and have more resources to continue to throw at the line. They've done this right. They're building something really good. It's still building, and they are going to be rookies. But
what would happen if Jimmy Garoppolo showed up in camp, on Wednesday, and it worked. Like somehow or another, it worked. We made the playoffs. I'm not saying we're going to be world beaters or anything, but we, got a wild card spot. Would the Seahawks elect to re-sign Jimmy Garoppolo to a deal and then have 2 first-round draft picks next year and 2 seconds to go out and add to the pile? I mean, you get a premier center at that spot. You get a right guard if you needed to, or you felt like Jay Curhan could start overall, and then you go out and you've got draft capital to like just completely fortify your team. That would be the best case scenario, I think, for the Seahawks. But
Yeah.
I hesitate not to have a young, quarterback out of this next draft. But you could really set your team up for years to come out of this next draft.
Well, you could. You can't even if you don't have Garoppolo.
Yeah, but if you have to use those 2 picks and maybe even 1 second to move up, if you say you finished with 9 wins or something, you'd end up picking 15.
Yeah.
And then you
have to move up. Yeah. You got to trade a bunch of stuff. I was thinking more of if Garoppolo doesn't come to Seattle, this team is going to lose a lot of games with Geno Smith under center. He's just not good. He's not good enough to lead this team to win. So they're going to lose a lot of games. They're going to be sitting, 3rd or 4th in the draft with, Jacksonville ahead of them, and they've already got a quarterback. So there's 3 really nice quarterbacks in this draft class. You're going to be able to get one of them
in August. You say that in August, but we'll see how the season plays out. There's always, 2 or 3 guys that emerge as well. So I think this quarterback class, actually, when you really look at it from a depth perspective, there's 6-7 guys that are going to go in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah. Right now, I mean, you're right. There's always guys that show up and they just like play out of their minds and they work their way into that conversation. But going into the season, I see 3. I see 3 guys that I believe are going to be at the top of the draft next year. And
I just watched some tape on Stroud yesterday. The kid from Ohio State. Wow. He's the whole package. He's the whole package.
He is absolutely. Go watch the guy from Kentucky.
Levin?
Yeah, because it's Kentucky, right? This isn't a blue blood program. This is a basketball school that finished 2nd in their conference last year, in part because of their quarterback play. He's big. He does everything. He's not coming from a team where everyone on the roster is better than the person they're playing against. And he just elevates the guys around him. I think he's going to be a really good player at the next level. And he's not the guy. Everyone's talking about, Stroud, and then the guy from Alabama, whose name I know
now that you just said it, I lost it. Right.
But everyone's talking about those 2. But I think,
he's such a small stature guy. I just don't know. When you look at a 5'10" guy that is 185 pounds soaking wet, you just wonder how that's going to translate to the NFL. I mean, I know he's got the arm, he's got the completion percentage, all that stuff. So talk to me.
How did it translate in Arizona?
Well, it hasn't translated yet. So talk to me when they do some damage in the playoffs and stuff.
Yeah.
He runs around great. I mean, he's a great quarterback, but he's immature. I think he's immature.
He's a great quarterback with a terrible head coach.
So talk to me. Talk to me about any other roster position groups that you want to talk about as far as players that have exceeded expectations or you're really confident in as far as going into the season. And then we'll talk about the bubble stuff and we can get out of here.
Interior linebacker is a problem as far as depth is concerned. But Cody Barton, especially with Jordan Brooks, like they're giving him the veteran treatment and not making him do much. And he's going to be fine. He's going to be great. But Cody Barton has just been so steady and solid and I didn't really expect that. I really expected him. I mean, he's in the 4th year and he's barely had any starts because he's more of a special teams guy, but he's looked good in there. And then V Jones has come in and he's undersized. He's only 225 pounds, but he's come in and really made everyone take notice of him as an interior linebacker.
Super athletic, super fast, undersized, as you said. But, here's a guy that you probably want to try to figure out how to get onto the roster because of his diversity. Play both middle linebacker, in the middle on the 3-4 front, and then rush the passer on the outside. Now, he would be completely at 225, just situational, if he needed to play on this team this year. But you put him in the weight room, you add nice 10 pounds of weight without taking away the athleticism or speed for next year. And I think that he's a piece that you can kind of build around a little bit. Undrafted rookie free agent.
Yeah.
I agree. I think he makes the roster, actually.
I think he makes the He's
one of maybe 2 guys, undrafted guys, on this whole roster right now. I think they have a real good shot.
Yeah. And not only good shot, I think he's made the roster. He is the 3rd best interior linebacker that this team has.
And the team cut the team cut the only guy really in front of him, in Joel Libunaway, who came over from Chicago in free agency, followed Sean Desai over here, and they let him go just because he just wasn't good. He just, as a linebacker, special teams guy, maybe, but linebacker, no way.
Yeah. And so what they ended up with is Nick Bellore is the special teams captain. He's a better special teamer, and can also play middle linebacker in a pinch.
Yeah.
Which is all you wanted. I'm not going to try and pronounce his name. You do it. Yeah, you don't want him on the field unless you absolutely have to. And it's the same with Nick Bellore, but Nick Bellore has shown better in that role. So he's better at both jobs. He makes the roster, and the linebacker gets cut. And so that just leaves V. Jones as the guy. He is the guy. He's going to be the 3rd interior linebacker on this team and has looked really good doing it. So him and Cody Barton have been really nice surprises for me.
The one disappointment, if you were going to have one, would be the Tariq Smith situation. He was a 5th round pick for the Seahawks in this draft as an edge rusher, outside linebacker, and has just not been able to be healthy enough to be properly evaluated. They did like what they saw in 2 practices that he was available, made a huge impact on those days, but has been unavailable on every other day. And so not sure what they do with him. They probably don't want to lose him.
No, they'll stick him on injured reserve, which makes him eligible to come off of injured reserve after week 6. Let him get healthy, let him practice.
Yeah. And we're going to have a roster prediction show here coming up. That'll be interesting to see. We'll have these conversations for every position group. And then, Tanner Muse, I guess, has been playing well. Aaron Donker, Lakeem Williams. I don't know. I don't know what to expect out of this group, because I'm not concerned about the edge guys, Jordan Brooks, Nuwasu, Taylor, Robinson. Those guys are going to play, and they're going to play well that's in this system.
You didn't even say Boye Mafe.
And Boye Mafe, right?
One of the team's top draft picks, right? Who has been outstanding in the preseason.
Yeah, but he is going to be situational. Let's be honest. He's not quite ready. I understand from Brock Heward that, and looking at him and so forth in practice and having some inside the building discussions, that he's not quite ready to hold up on the edge as far as defending the run and so forth. But they will use him on 3rd downs in this season, and he will be effective at that. But Vi Jones is the key cog to this linebacker situation, because he would be instrumental in both in backing up the entire thing. So he would be a guy that would, you'd mentioned 46 players make a game day dress up, and he would likely be one of those guys just because of that diversity and the fact that he would play special teams. He would be perfect for that. All right. What else is there? I think that's about it as far as, good stories to come out. Oh, I did want to mention Eskridge is practicing again, likely to play in this game.
Yep. That's good. That's good. I mean, we've been waiting for him for, he didn't really play last season because of all the injuries and stuff. He hasn't really done anything in this training camp and preseason because he's been hurt. Having him be healthy enough to get on the field is great.
Yeah. Yeah, we just haven't seen anybody come up and grab that 3rd spot. I mean, Freddie Swain's had a rough camp, rough games. Eskridge hasn't been out there to see anything at all. Penny Hart's kind of stepped up, but I think they would like to have a little bit more size for that third, fourth spot on the roster at wide receiver. Marquise Goodwin hasn't had a lot of time to play,
Although
and likely to sit out in this game as well.
Pete Carroll kind of let it slip that Goodwin's going to make the roster.
Well, I think he makes the roster because of default. When you take a look at the list, it's like, what do? You've got Derek Young. I think Derek Young makes this roster. I think they try to sneak Bo Melton onto the practice squad because there's just not going to be enough space now. Bo Melton, that's the scary proposition because he's got 4.34 speed.
Someone will take him.
Someone like that might be hard to get.
You'd keep Bo Melton over Penny Hart on the roster.
Yeah, because Penny Hart could probably slip through if you needed him to.
And you've got Marquise Goodwin, who fills that same role and is going to make the team. So
that's a hard. If I was Penny Hart, that would be a hard one for me to swallow because you've outperformed anybody. You've been available. You've made the plays. You have returnability, and for the team then to cut you in favor of Bo Melton, who hasn't shown as much, is really hard. And that's the age factor coming in the NFL is just the reality of the fact.
Well,
Bo Melton's got more upside. Yeah.
And Penny Hart's 5'8", in his cleats. And he's going to be easier to slip through onto the practice squad just for that reason.
I agree.
So one name you didn't mention in the wide receiver group that I'm really interested in seeing what he does tonight against Dallas is Aaron Fuller, because late in in preseason game 2, he was the guy getting open for Jacob Eason and doing good things. Now I think he dropped a touchdown he shouldn't have. But it was also one of those acrobatic plays up in the air, and it came out when he hit the ground kind of thing. But he got there and he got up and he was open. And if he comes out and continues to make plays and shows that he can get downfield and cover kicks and that kind of stuff for special teams, he could be, that last wide receiver to make the roster as well. So
let's quickly talk about bubble players. Josh Johnson, running back, I think or Darwin Thompson, either one of those guys are kind of bubble-ish. Ken Walker is injured. Rashad Penny's has the injury tendency, so they may want to keep 5 guys. But Travis Homer and DJ Dallas have shown that they're going to make this roster this year. I was a little concerned going into the offseason in the summer here about Travis Homer, but really he showed up in his willingness to run hard and so forth. He's
looked good. DJ Dallas has looked explosive. We're not talking, like, people aren't talking enough about how well he's played. The two of them, Penny looks fantastic. They have kept him off the field on purpose. That he hasn't been, he's hurt and can't practice or play. It's, we don't want him out there risking injury. We want him ready for week 1. And so he's been given the veteran treatment. And so those 3 guys are going to be available on game day, week 1. They're going to be your guys. And that's assuming that Walker, is out because of injury. He may not be. They may keep him and push him through because he's just so dang talented. I wouldn't blame him. That's 4 deep. And the other guy that's really shown has been Darwin Thompson. And if you go back and rewatch last week's preseason game, Darwin Thompson's making it hard for the team to cut him.
Mm-hmm. I think he's a guy that you can get onto the practice squad.
I think so too, but he's doing what he needs to do.
Does the team want to keep 5 running backs or 3 tight ends? I think they keep 3 tight ends.
I think they keep 3 tight ends.
What about, there's 2 wide receivers I wanted to talk about. Kevin Cassis, I understand, is having a great camp. It's a guy that we just brought on like 2.5 weeks ago. But he's impressive, I guess. And I'm interested to see if he has any time in the offense in this preseason game against Dallas. And then JJ Arcega-Whiteside. I have not heard a single peep from anybody about what this guy's doing in practice. So
I haven't either. And he came out and struggled to get open and then dropped a pass in the end zone, last week. And I guess I've been biased by reading all of the stuff out of Philly about him, and fans could not be happier to see a player go than watching Arcega-Whiteside get traded. And the fact that they traded him for Ugo Amadi and then turned around and traded Ugo Amadi again.
You saw that. So I sent you that little text about Tom Pelissero's news that the Eagles are sending Ugo Amadi to the Titans while swapping late round picks in 2024. That's essentially for nothing. And being traded twice in 10 days is very heartbreaking for a player because you're just getting set up. You may have been apartment searching and so forth, signed a lease, and then boom, you're gone. It's like, oof, that's tough.
Yeah.
That's rough.
Well, so that'll tell you what. So the Eagles, what they thought, they traded away Arcega-Whiteside for a guy that they were then willing to part with for nothing 10 days later. That'll tell you how valued they thought of Arcega-Whiteside. And that was a guy that they've used a second round pick on. He was picked, 7 picks before DK Metcalf. And he's been that disappointing for them that they were just like, they just wanted him off the roster.
I guess the when you go look at the plays and so forth that he's had in the NFL since he's arrived, I think he's got like 250 yards receiving and 30 receptions over 4 years or whatever. But
I think it was like 16 receptions.
Those receptions look good. They look great. He's high points the ball. He's athletic. He shows, but there's just as many bloopers of him dropping catchable balls. And I think that's the big thing is he can't, his focus or whatever it is, he just has trouble holding the ball.
He's averaging, I think, 4 receptions a year as a pro.
So turn your attention to the defense, unless you want to talk about anybody on the offensive line, turn your attention to the defense and tell me about your biggest bubble player that you're wanting to show out in this game to save his job.
Marquise Blair. How can it not be?
Well, I would say Miles Adams and LJ Collier too. And I don't know if LJ Collier's practicing right now and available in this game, but man, those two players are, I think, fighting for one spot.
Well, I don't even know if there is a spot for either of them. Just because there's only, they're in a 3-4, right? There's only so many spots for defensive linemen on the roster. And you've got Woods, Monet, Ford, Shelby Harris, Quentin Jefferson. All of those guys, I think, are guaranteed spots. And so how many more are you keeping?
So I've got Al Woods, Brian Monet, Matt Guttel, and I think Matt was cut. And then Shelby Harris, Puna Ford, Quentin Jefferson, LJ Collier. So I've got 7 frontline players total making the roster. But Miles Adams could be interchangeable. Miles Adams could play both inside and out, I think. I think he's like 290, 300 pounds, something like that.
He's 290. He's a defensive end in a 3-4, not a nose tackle.
Correct.
So he can play on either side. And he's actually got, he's one of those guys that at 290, he's a pass rusher, not, a run defender. And
so he's got 2 sacks this preseason so far.
Yep. He's a guy, he can make the roster, and Collier's been hurt, and I'm not sure. I don't think he's practicing yet.
I don't think he makes the roster, but I don't think he gets cut either. I think he just ends up on injured reserve. And so, Blair's the one that I'm really. Let's talk about Marquise Blair. Yeah, Marquise Blair. Here's the problem with Marquise Blair. Now, he led the team last game with 8 tackles, but he also had 5 missed tackles. And he just doesn't wrap up. It's got to be so aggravating for Pete Carroll, teaching the method that's known across the league as being the best tackling method in all of football. And Blair just does not. He doesn't like to wrap up. He likes to hit people and knock people over with his strength. And I'm not sure where that comes from and how they can't break it, but it's a detriment to him in this.
Well, and he keeps having penalties because of it. Like in this last game, he had the helmet to helmet personal foul because he just wants to hit a guy, and not tackle a guy. And so, yeah, I mean, there's that. But that was who he was in college too.
Yes.
He was the
Yes.
guy who was super physical, had all these big hits, had all these targeting penalties and stuff. And Pete Carroll loved that about him. He loved that aggressiveness.
That's true. That is very true.
We know the other thing about Marquise Blair that I think you and I kind of both miss, he, despite having 4 years in the league, is only 25. Right? He's only 25.
Yeah.
He's still young. He's still a young guy. And he's going to be given that's going to provide him with other options. Because he's young enough that, he's had a couple of injured years. He's still only 25.
So I'm going to talk to you about one more player, and then we're going to get out of here.
Okay.
I'm saying that this player is on the bubble, and it's going to be weird. Jason Myers. Jason Myers making like $4.5 million. He's very inconsistent. That I'm hearing from credible sources that his job may be on the line. And if he misses a kick in this game, that they're going to go out on the market and look for a kicker.
Yeah.
And during cutdowns, because he's just, I don't know what it is. He's missed some kicks in practice. It's been reported by Corbin Smith that the team is evaluating this position.
Well, and they should. I mean, he for some reason, he's got a reputation within the fans for being bad, even though he has a franchise record for consecutive kicks.
Yeah, that was the year before last. He had all those kicks, and he was like, wow, this is great. And then last year, there was a drop-off.
But it wasn't as bad. The biggest problem for Myers hasn't been that, he's missed the big kick or the long kick. It's that he can't get an extra point between the uprights.
Well, and he was at 74%.
Yeah, it's
rate last year, and they want him up at like 85.
I know, it's the easier the kick, the more likely he is to miss it, which is got to be frustrating because when you send him out there on a 54 yarder, you're like, okay, he might make this, he might not. Your expectations not there, but when you send him out there for a 33 yarder, you're like, you got to make it, and then he misses that one, or you send him out there on an extra point and he shanks that to the left.
Yes,
and so I can see it. That they would.
It's a roll of the dice, and the reason I say it's a roll of the dice is that you're taking somebody else's cut guy and you're putting him in. It's a mental game as much as it is a physical game, striking the ball, and etc. But the difference is the cap number, with Jason Myers, and so
Jason Myers was in camp a few years ago, and they chose to bring out the really old guy from Oakland. Sebastian Janikowski, and they gave Janikowski the job. Jason Myers went on to the Jets and was an All-Pro.
That's right.
In that same year,
and then they brought him back the very next year.
But when they brought him back the next year, they had to pay him to get him to come back because he had just gone and been an All-Pro. If they'd made the right decision with the Janikowski thing, Myers would be making less now, and this wouldn't be as big of a thing. But they screwed it up then. And now they're in a position where they're overpaying a guy for his performance. And that's typically what leads to a guy getting cut.
Yeah.
I just hope they don't go back to the Janikowski. Who was the guy before? The guy from Minnesota who shanked all the kicks there. And then
I've chosen to forget that name.
And then for some reason, the coaches were surprised that he couldn't make a kick in Seattle. Can we not go down those roads again? And
well, sometimes that happens. I've always thought that they'd be wise to expend a 7th round pick on a kicker. Just get a guy that you really like in the draft and get a young guy under contract for 4 years. And then if he's great, it works out great. Now they're in a situation where that veteran cut out of camp is an option, and as a placeholder, quote unquote, to come in and hold down that position for a year or two at most. So we'll see. But the likely he goes in the season that they like him. He's probably a great guy in the on the team and in meetings and so forth. So there's a lot to be said for that. But at the end of the day, you've got to make your kicks, and he's just shown some inconsistencies last year, and then apparently in training camp this year enough where the team is evaluating.
They're also in a situation where if he is on the roster the Tuesday before week 1, because he's a veteran, he's been around the league long enough, his contract becomes fully guaranteed. And so they could very well decide to move on, cut him, bring in someone that's just around the league currently on another roster.
The Seahawks sit at about $15 million in cap space. And you've got the Jimmy Garoppolo thing hanging.
And that would be why they've hung on to that, is because they want the flexibility to go get a guy if somebody becomes a cap casualty late in the offseason. And if it's Garoppolo, great. If it's someone else and they think, hey, this is a guy that can come in and make a difference and be a big improvement, they've got the cap room to spend on it.
All right, let's get out of here. So we're talking about the Dallas Cowboys games tonight, and enjoy the game. Keith, drink a beer for me.
Will do.
And yeah, it'll be good. We're going to get on this weekend, I think, and do a recap show. And we're going to be talking about a roster prediction show, I think, before Tuesday's cut deadline. See if we can get that out ahead of time. Sometimes that's tricky because the team may elect to make half the cuts on Monday and another half on Tuesday. We just don't know. So we'll try to get that done. If not, we'll have a reaction show.
You want to know something super surprising about tonight's game against Dallas? Seattle is a 7-point favorite.
What? Interesting. On the road. Yeah.
On the road, and they've looked awful in the first 2 games.
You know what the over/under for season win totals out of Vegas is right now in the Seahawks?
6.5.
5.5.
5.5. Yeah, honestly, that's about right.
Yeah, and they know their business, really. That's their job.
Vegas doesn't make money by being wrong. They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I'll also say that anyone who bets a lot of money on preseason NFL games, you got a problem.
I haven't seen Pete Carroll lose less than 7 games in the last 12 years. So I might take that.
Win less than 7 games?
Yeah, win less than 7 games.
You said lose less. I'm like, sorry. I've seen him lose less.
Win less than 7, and so it's going to be. I think I would take the upside on that bet, actually, because I think 6 wins is doable for this team. I think 7 is attainable. Beyond that, I'm not sure, but 5 or less, I think that's a pretty solid bet that Seattle's going to win enough to do that.
You're going to take the over?
Just on the coaching. We got a good coaching staff, and they're going to win some games on their own. And you throw out a placeholder like Geno with a solid defense, and we're going to be in games. It's just at the end of games, there's going to be a lot of 1-score games. And if those go against Seattle, we're going to lose more than we win, for sure.
Yeah. When you don't have a closer, right? You don't have Russell Wilson out there. You're going to lose most of those 1-score games. And that's, I think, where this team's going to be.
Just because most teams have a better quarterback.
Who has a worse starting quarterback right now than Seattle?
Well, Davis Mills probably, but that's questionable even.
Jacoby Brissett in Cleveland for the first 11 games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we're right in that conversation, aren't we?
Yeah, and so that's the part when I say they're going to be in games.
Trey Lance hasn't done anything yet in San Francisco, but we'll see. He's got the upside, but
he's got the talent. But this is the Seahawks are going to be in games. The rest of the roster is good enough. They're going to be in games. They're going to be within a score. They're going to have opportunities to win games, and they're going to come up short because of quarterback play. And it's going to be frustrating And ultimately, if they win 5 games and they hit the under on that bet, they're going to be in great shape, because now a guy like Stroud or the kid from Kentucky will land in Seattle's lap, and they'll still have another first and 2 seconds to build the roster around them. And they'll be in great shape going into next year.
All right. Have fun. Enjoy the game. Love you, man. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Find Keith on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter. Find the show on the website, SeahawksPlaybook.com, and all your favorite podcast platforms and YouTube. And make sure you hit the subscribe button. Really important to us. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWSeahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.